You're listening to Beyond the 9 to 5, a podcast that inspires entrepreneurs to push for more, passionately fulfill their dreams, and own your life. My name is Brenda Leopold, the chief visionary and founder of World Headquarters, the next evolution in co-working spaces. On this show, I sit down with entrepreneurs to hear their stories, share insights, and look behind the scenes of becoming an entrepreneur. This is Beyond the 9 to 5. Well, good morning. Today's guest on the show is Randy. Randy is our in-house talent, and I'm going to let him take a minute here and introduce himself and talk to us about what he does in his office when he's talking to himself.
Well, I talk to myself. I am Randy Streu, Randy Streu Voiceovers, and that's kind of self-explanatory, I think. I do voiceover, voice acting. Basically, anytime a business or an author or any number of people need a voice on something, it could be an industrial video, a educational program, audiobook, podcast, and they need a voice, even a telephone system. You know, the friendly guys who are they sound like they're not really robots, but you're not fooled. Yeah, that's actually a voice actor usually. So I do all of those types of things. So it could be, you know, my day could vary from anything to reading, half-hour modules on employee training, and then an epic fantasy novel, and then a product, just voicing a product. So Very cool. So what got you where you are? Like, what got you into that industry, and what is it that drew you into this current role you're in your business? Well, I was in radio for 15 years. I'm actually over 20 at this point, year communications professional. I've been in most aspects of communication, from corporate communication to wedding videography to, as I mentioned, 15 years in radio. Briefly, I was even an electronic court reporter. So I've kind of got a familiarity with all these sort of branches of media and communications. I enjoyed radio a great deal, and I started wanting to stretch myself a little bit. When I first got my job here in Wisconsin, it was a morning show job here. And when I first got it, I had to drive out on my own. And my wife, knowing how I am, got me into audio dramas as a way to kind of stay awake on the road. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I started listening to, it was actually Sherlock Holmes, old Sherlock Holmes episodes, while I was driving, plus some others, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and a couple of others. And I started listening to those, and I got really into the whole concept of audio drama and of reading audiobooks and of doing all those sorts of things. So while I was working my morning show for 4 years, I started sort of finding ways to do freelance voice work outside of my job, so that by the time I actually lost my job, my wife was like, I guess it's time to do it full time. So
here's your sign, right?
Yep.
Very exciting. So, as a business owner now, like, what would you say is probably the biggest surprise for you about being a business owner and taking the leap and going out on your own? Or
as a business owner in general, I think the biggest issue, or the biggest surprise that kind of came to me that really shouldn't have been a surprise was how much time I spend not doing my job.
Sure.
How much time I spend doing administrative work,
yeah,
doing marketing, doing networking. So much of it is just networking and finding ways to market yourself, whether it's sending emails out, sending demos out to prospective clients, doing social media, trying to, at least drum up an interest in what I do.
Right.
Learning more about what I do, whether it's through podcasts or through coaching or through other voice talents who've been in the industry for a while. And then you have all of just the sort of regular day-to-day business administrative nonsense of, people are going to pay you. Now you need to actually find out how that whole mechanism works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Getting an accounting program, working on all of that. And then towards the end of the year, figuring out, the whole tax situation, unless you're smart and do it quarterly, which I'm not, and I don't. So.
That's one. So what would be your big picture dream to see for your business in the next, I'm not even gonna give you a time frame because I don't want to limit you, but like, what would be exciting for you to see your business do in the future?
I would love to be doing podcasting full time. I've mentioned I have a deep love for audio drama, and I think it's an exciting venue, and it's sort of made a comeback in recent years. So a lot more people are sort of into audio dramas and things like that. But more than that, just this sort of thing. I have an interview show called Living Freelance.
Nice.
And that kind of went on hiatus while I was building my business. So
yeah, right.
So now I'm ready to bring that back.
Yeah.
Some audio dramas that either I'm writing or I'm acting in. I would love to be full time with a staff producing audio for today's media.
Awesome. That's a really cool vision. That's a really neat idea. I love it. I love where you're going. So is there any words of wisdom you would want to put out into the world for people considering going out on their own or starting something maybe on the side or having a dream of being a business owner someday? Is there anything that you would share?
I've read a lot about freelancing after sort of stumbling into it. Found out I completely did it wrong. But I think that what I would have potentially done differently, I can't say for sure. One thing I would have potentially done differently is started to build my business before I was thrown into the water head first.
Yeah.
Starting it as a side gig, starting to build up clients, and working within my capacity to do that up until, so that when I lost my job, it wasn't such an upstream swim.
Yeah, for sure.
As what it became, or even I could have, depending on when, if I hadn't lost my job, I could have been the one to decide, okay, now I'm ready to take the business full time.
Sure.
It's tiring to do it that way.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hours to do it that way.
Yep.
But it's definitely starts you on better footing than from zero.
Sure. So one of the things that I personally have found as a business owner is that because our jobs are beyond the 9 to 5, they require a lot of lifestyle changes and some, impact to our families and our friends and our home lives. Is there anything that you found that worked well for you in order to make sure that, like, being a business owner and all the, parts and pieces that come with that have had a minimal impact on your family, or has it maybe even made a better impact on your family in any way?
Well, on the one hand, the job that I had was really family friendly, as far as if I needed time, I could take it, things like that. Within reason, obviously.
Right. Sure.
When I first started working full time, I literally set my studio up in my kitchen. It was I created a little kind of cheapo sound booth, set up all my equipment in my kitchen, and that's where I worked. And which obviously is a little disruptive.
Right. Yeah.
So you get to where, you send the kids off to school, you set your stuff up, you do the job, you tear down, you get your kids back from school, and you just say, okay, nobody touches Daddy's microphone.
Eating dinner at Dad's studio.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the goal at the time was to be able to build a home studio. We just didn't have a space for that.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I've read and have discovered myself is that the more you can separate your work from your home, the better.
Sure.
The more you can say, okay, when I close the door, I'm at work.
Yeah.
When I open the door and I come out of my space, now I'm at home and I can leave work behind.
Yep. Sure.
And that was something that I had a really hard time doing at first, and to some extent still. If I get a text in the middle of the night and I happen to get up and see it, I end up responding to it or whatever. I don't give it a lot of thought, but if it's there and they're waiting to hear from me or whatever, I'll text them back or make communication just to say, okay, I got your message. We'll talk about it in the morning, that sort of thing. But sort of the reason that I ended up moving to an outside office was so that I could have that separation.
Yeah.
Where, okay, I'm at work. This is where I do my job. This is where I do my job functions. Once I walk out of the door, I'm dad again. I'm husband again.
Right.
The aspects of my job, other than something to talk with my wife about while we're walking around and enjoying each other's company,
right,
doesn't exist.
Right. Yep.
And it's important to have that separation. And I've found that I've had to be very intentional about making that separation.
Well, you're definitely not alone. I see it all the time. Like some of the more successful entrepreneurs you see, they've gotten really good at creating their own boundaries because we don't have the traditional 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, clear distinction, between when we're working and when we're home. And we all have that extra commitment to, get things done at all cost. And so I think, it's real easy for us to sit back and say, it's fine. It's 6 o'clock and I'll just take care of it real quick because it's urgent and it's important and it matters. But we forget how easily that then starts to blur the lines between family time and work time.
Oh yeah. Well, and even with the situation we have now, I mean, there are situations, and my wife is I think more than reasonably accommodating and understanding about these things.
Yep.
Because most days, I go get my kids from school, take them home, and I go back to work for an hour.
Sure.
And then because they're old enough, so I go back to work for an hour. And then I go back home, make dinner, and usually that's the end of it.
Right.
There are some times where it's like, oh, okay, I've got more stuff I've got to get done, stuff that I couldn't get done during the day or for whatever reason, so I go back to work at night.
Right.
Like this, as we record this, Mother's Day is coming up.
Yes, I heard the adventures you're having with Mother's Day.
Yeah, so I'm sort of doing a soft remodel of my kitchen, and I tore apart we had a water closet that we haven't used for years. So I tore that apart, and I'm building a pantry for my wife, and a workable kitchen for Mother's Day because
amazing.
She's a very good baker, but she really needs to have a kitchen that works for her and that she's comfortable in.
That's amazing.
And so that's kind of what I'm doing during the day
when you're supposed to be
when I'm supposed to be here. So because she works too, so the
right.
only time I can do anything is when she's out of the house.
Right.
Which means, of course, I work nights
right.
again.
Right.
But
and hence we see you burning the midnight oil over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been
thank
really
you.
fun having you, as usual. All our fun conversations we get to have here in the co-working space. But thank you so much. It was really helpful, I think, hopefully, to some of the listeners to hear your perspective on what your business has meant and what it will be.
All right. Thank you.